We are live on the Conversations That Matter podcast. We're going to try this again today. This is the second attempt. My computer's not behaving, and if it freezes again, then I probably will abandon the effort and we'll see about doing a podcast perhaps tomorrow. I've ran some tests on the computer, and everything seems to be fine, which doesn't make sense because it kept freezing, and then I'd have to restart it, and I was having difficulty even getting back into Windows. So we'll see. I'm not, a computer nerd necessarily. I know a little bit about computers. So this is throwing me for a little bit of a loop. I think everything's updated. Hardware seems to be fine. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on. But anyway, we're going to persevere. And we have a lot to talk about today. The reason that I haven't been doing as many podcasts lately, there's a few, but one of the main ones is I've been on everyone else's podcast. That's really what's happened. And I think I need to do that to promote the 1607 documentary. There's going to be audiences that they're not listening to me and they might listen to another host. And so I think one of the biggest ones I was on this week, I went on a few, but I guess last week was the Tom Woods show. And you can check out Fridays. Actually, I think it is the last episode, perhaps, if you go to the feed for Tom Woods. And I did a podcast yesterday with Will Spencer that was about 2.5 hours long, a long podcast. And we talked about 1607, but we also talked about the origins of this particular podcast and my internet presence. And he asked me a lot of questions that had me talking about things I have not talked about on the Conversations That Matter show. So I will link that when I get a chance. In fact, what I'll do is for the patrons, I will send you an update and I'll just link to all the different podcasts, if I can remember all of them, that I've been on over the last 2 weeks that haven't been this one. But it's time today for the Conversations That Matter podcast. That's the podcast that I obviously run, and it's the one that where I get to share my unfiltered views on, I guess, whatever. But mostly today it's going to be on Christian-related stuff, some controversies going on social media, but also some. So I'm going to reveal some things about some Christian organizations that I think you ought to be aware of. And none of them will be shocking for people who listen to this podcast regularly, but I think it's good to keep the pressure on and let institutions that are Christians know, hey, we are still paying attention. If you're going to go social justice, if you're going to go woke, if you're going to keep pumping in these things, we're going to mention it. We're going to talk about it. And I think parents who send their kids to educational institutions that do that kind of thing, thinking that these institutions are solid, ought to know those things. And if anything, this, in my experience, has been a remedy because some institutions will bend to outside pressure, institutions that will not bend to inside pressure often. And so it's in that spirit that I do some of this, and I will reveal during the course of the podcast more and more. We have people filtering in. It looks like I am on Facebook this time, which is good. It wasn't working before. So we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, we're on X, and I will upload to Rumble later. It doesn't look like that one's working right now, but I think that's on me. I don't think I insert. When Rumble's different than the other ones, you have to do a whole bunch of stuff, and I didn't do it. So anyway, well, let's start. Let's see, with what topic are we going to start today? Let's let me just announce this, and then we will start. The Fundamentals Conference is coming up. This is a men's conference. It's really just a weekend, so it's not that long, but it's in a beautiful, beautiful part of the country in the Adirondack Mountains. And when people hear about New York, they don't think of the Adirondack Mountains, and they come and they realize how beautiful it is. But we have an excellent facility, excellent food, excellent fellowship, excellent speakers this year. And check it out. You go to fundamentalsconference.com. There's different price options. If you want single occupancy, meaning you're going to room yourself alone, and you want the privacy, it's $310. Actually, you really can't beat that for what you're getting. You're getting really good food. And we have a culinary graduate who is overseeing all the food. And if you want triple quad occupancy, in other words, you're going to be bunking with other people, $220. If you go to the website, there should be, the schedule's there, and there should be a carpool set up. I think the link is somewhere. Now I'm looking for it and I'm not seeing it. Oh, there it is. Sign up for carpool. So you can also sign up for a carpool if you're coming from a certain area and there's other people coming from that area. So wanted to mention that. Looking forward to that. That's going to be happening now in less than a month. Wow. Does time fly when that starts. So All right. Forge and Anvil says, I thought New York was only pizza and rats. What are these mountains that you speak of? Well, you got to come. You got to come to the Fundamentals Conference. You'll find out. There's some of the most beautiful mountains. In fact, if you look at a map of New York, just do this. Go to a search engine, type in map of New York, and you're going to see in the sort of the center right of the state, there's going to be a large section. It's like a big oval. And that's the Adirondack National, or not national, sorry, State Park. It's huge. It's incredibly big. In fact, it might be the biggest state park in the country, and it's bigger than a lot of national parks. It's just huge. So, Yankees lie about mountains. Thanks, Sean. Appreciate that. You got to come and see. And if you judge me by what people say about me on Twitter, I'm not a Yankee, right? So I wouldn't steer you wrong on this. I think Sean's been watching too much of Shane or something. Well, let's start with some of the Christian institutions that still have, and it's not unexpected, but some woke problems, okay? And I just will say this at the first part of this. People will reach out to me and ask me, John, where's a college or a seminary that's not woke that I can send myself or my children or some friend or whoever? And I will say, the way that you're approaching it already is off, because you're about 99.9% guaranteed you're going to encounter some social justice stuff. It is in the water. It is going to be at the most conservative places. It shouldn't be, but this has been percolating for a long time. And there aren't many institutions that have really taken extreme measures, or even extreme's not even the word, just common sense measures, aggressive measures to drive this stuff out. And so you're going to have a mix of stuff. And that's what I tell everyone. And so, especially at large institutions where there's a lot of people employed, and even if they have rules against teaching certain things, we don't do CRT here, right? I mean, how many states pass those laws, and the public schools in those states are still teaching CRT, right? They're just using different names. It's the same concepts. So if you have a large Christian university, large Christian institution, denomination, and they say, we're not doing any of that, you can't really trust that. Obviously, it's happening somewhere because it's in the water. This is what a lot of people believe. Even the people who don't think they believe it usually believe aspects of it. And if it's not being all, if you have a big university and you're not in every classroom, then there's going to be teachers who are pushing it anyway. So I just want to preface it with that. You just have to prepare your students, your children, for encountering these ideas. That's why I wrote the books I wrote. That's why I wrote especially Christianity and Social Justice. So you will have resources when you go into these fights. So let's talk about a few institutions, though, just to let everyone know that what I just said is true. And we're going to start with Liberty University, which is a place that is dear to my heart. And I'm just going to point this out. So if you go to their class that's called not 447. I thought I had it. Oh, 489. I think it's this one, 489. Yeah. It's called Church Ministries Capstone. Let me just read for you the description of this course. A capstone course designed to equip the student in developing a master plan for ministry, and will focus on reviewing the acquired knowledge, value, and skills of the church ministry curriculum. This course seeks to integrate the concept, techniques, and knowledge of all areas of church ministry. This course is designed to be taken the final semester for graduating seniors. Attention is given to the student's spiritual, personal ministry life. Now, it sounds like a great course, right? Sounds solid. And like you wouldn't think that going into that, it's not gender studies. We'll put it that way, right? So someone sent this to me who shall be anonymous, but these are assignments from that particular class. So I'm going to read for you these assignments, and then we'll talk about it. I do feel the need to just say, as I'm doing this, because it kind of kills me a little. I love Liberty University, and some people might think, you're shooting yourself in the foot from ever working there, or ever. That could be. That very well could be. But in my experience, especially at Liberty, they do respond when people say things online about them. I don't know what it is. Well, I do know what it is, but I don't know why that works. It seems to sometimes be a mechanism that is more effective than even internal when concerns are raised internally, So, so yeah, parents and students who are there, my understanding is these questions have been there at least from 2021 to 2023, and possibly they're still there at the school if you enroll in this class. So here are the questions, okay? Scenario one, as church leadership, you all have been praying for a minority elder for the past 8 months. As you find yourself between two elders, you are forced to make a decision, as you only have enough budgeted funds to hire one more role. The white elder candidate is an excellent communicator with a master's degree. He has no egregious moral failures and gels amazingly with your team. The minority elder candidate is not as great of a communicator, but is this racist? Does that qualify for what people call racist? I don't know. He's not as great a communicator, apparently, the minority, but he's a ton of potential. The minority elder is too loud and yells when he preaches. He seems to be a little too loud for your church body. The minority elder has no egregious moral failures. The team, I don't know why they even inserted the moral failures part there. Neither of them have moral failures. The tension the team feels is that strictly on paper, they would hire the white guy in a heartbeat. However, the reality that the other guy is black makes the team feel guilty that he should be hired anyway. Is this black hire just tokenism? Should we just wait for the right black guy? If we hire the white guy, are we sinful? Work with your group to decide what you would do as a local church. Now, we'll talk about it, but here's the second scenario. As a youth pastor who has predominantly Caucasian students, let's see here. I guess maybe I'm correcting the grammar of the question. You have been invited to participate in an urban summer camp with mostly African-American and Latino students. A youth pastor, not as a youth pastor. Okay, so this is a scenario. There's a youth pastor going to a camp. The parents feel that this summer camp is not the best option for their children to attend because of the racial tensions present within the country. They request a meeting with the youth pastor to voice their concerns about their children attending an all-urban camp. As a youth pastor, how would you calm the concerns of parents and ensure them that this camp would be a great experience for their children to attend? And I think there's one more. I guess I'll just read this real quick too. This is another scenario. A new couple starts to visit your church. They are married with 9 adopted children. They have been together for 13 years and have had at least 4 of their children for over 5 years. Every church they have visited has quickly pushed them out. Why? Because this couple is Mike and James, 2 men. The couple has been visiting your church for 6 weeks when a few deacons decide it is time to confront the pastor and find out if he's going to how he's going to handle the situation. They are not happy that their children are in Sunday school with the kids from the family. They do not want their kids to get the wrong message. So question 1, how would you advise the pastor to respond to these deacons? The following week, one of the men in the couple, Mike, decides during the invitation that he wants to surrender his life to Jesus and responds. He is broken. People have been praying for them and everyone is excited for him. The next day, he sends the pastor an email and wants him to meet about his decision and what this means for his life. He brings his husband, James, to meet, his alleged husband. Well, let's just correct that, to the meeting. And they begin to ask the following questions. And the questions are, what does the Bible say about homosexuality? Does giving my life to Jesus mean that we have to break up? What about our kids? Will this rip our kids away from their parents? And if so, what message will this send to the kids about the church? If not, what message is being sent about your views on sin to the church? Do you ask them to stop having sex? If you do, then how do you respond when James says, that makes no sense, we are married? Question 2, how would you advise the pastor to answer these questions and other questions that surround the situation? All right, so this may seem pretty mild. I think from those who lived through 2020, it probably is, but given some of the extreme things we saw. But in principle, especially that last question, there's nothing wrong with bringing up dynamics that are around us in a ministry setting and saying we have to address these challenges. The concern, though, that I have with something like this, especially the racial ones, which I'll go back to so you can see what I'm looking at here, is that in either question, the way that it's framed seems to be inserting assumptions into the minds of those making the decision here, the students who are supposed to be giving advice or figuring out how to navigate this, that that the dynamics are such that you ought to be on eggshells. You ought to be somehow considering how this looks externally. What does this say about your church if you hire the black guy, right? Which I think the focus is in the exact wrong place. Like, and I would say that extends even to this other scenario with gender and sexuality. The whole focus, the way it's framed, is how does this look? What's the message that's being sent about your views on sin to the church? What's the message this will send to our kids about the church? What's the message? I mean, I don't know. The fact that in that scenario, it seems like this goes on for a while and it's not addressed. That alone seems to be there's a problem already with the church. Like, why is it that the pastor has taken it? That should take one Sunday, I would think. And you can do it in a friendly way, but you let them know that this is not something that the church condones. It does not mean that you are hostile to those who come into the church, whether they be homosexual, whether they be boyfriend, girlfriend living in an adulterous situation. But there should be, I think, whether it's from the pulpit or whether it's in personal interaction, if there's going to be involvement to the point that they're dropping their kids off in Sunday school and the nursery, there needs to be a conversation pretty early on. So this is like the can seems to be kicked down the road at this point, and they're asking, what is this going to say? How is your response going to look to people? And then the same thing with this racial tension scenario, except I think this one's worse because you're inserting the idea into people's minds that they should be considering these dynamics in their hiring, that they should be looking at, like, because the guy's black, apparently, even if he is not as qualified, that should count for something. And obviously this is open-ended. So you could answer the question by saying, no, this isn't biblical. Like, we're going to just go with the standard scripture has for hiring leaders and elder and deacon qualifications and that kind of thing. You can just do that, of course. I will just say this, though. I have it on very good authority, and I'm not going to out anyone here, but that at least in one scenario, that kind of answer was not accepted. Okay, so that's I'll say that's all I'll say for now. But there is an agenda that's still operating in our Christian institutions. I'm not even blaming Liberty University for this, as far like the people in administration may not even know what's going on in some of these classes. Okay, so I don't know, but this kind of thing is going to happen, and this is the real point. You send your kids to a solid university, a Christian university that's trying to take measures to guard against these kinds of things. You're probably going to get stuff like this, that even if it's not as overt as perhaps in 2020 it seemed to be, it still will insert ideas into your children's mind, ideas that may not have been there before, without, I would say, the necessary guardrails and the thinking through it, the guidance that they need to actually navigate this. Because really what they should be told, in my opinion here, is in a church ministry scenario, we have guidance from scripture. This is what it says about qualifications. People who come to you and try to give you other qualifications and say that, no, it needs to be race should factor into this because of systemic racism or something like that. We're just not going to follow that because that is a foreign requirement that the scripture doesn't know about. I would say too, I would just add at the end, I suppose, of this particular scenario, that suitability does mean something. So when you look in the qualifications in Titus and Timothy for elders and deacons, you do see some things that require prudence and wisdom to navigate, right? What's hospitable in New York, for example, is not the same as what's hospitable in Mississippi. I know this very well. You don't just drop in necessarily on people in New York. That's considered a rude thing. But in Mississippi, it can still be considered rude if you don't do it, right? So there are these cultural things that I think we apply biblical principles within. So I'm not saying you don't take any cultural factors into consideration, but clearly what's going on in this assignment is an assumption that there have been historic wrongs against Black people in this country. And that should somehow now affect the way that you approach hiring someone. And it should also affect the way that you approach parents who aren't comfortable about their kids going to a camp where apparently there's a lot of Black and Latino kids. Usually those in a scenario like that, that's not even the full picture. There's probably a concern somewhere along the lines of, I think it might even have said that it was urban. Let me just check. It was an urban camp, right? Let's see, yeah, urban. It says urban. So yeah, I mean, if it's 2020 and your church wants to go to an urban camp with your 8-year-old, and they're going to bring your 8-year-old, and it's kids from that local area, and there's been a lot of riots and I mean, that it's the setting also. It's not, or it could really only solely be the setting. I mean, may have nothing to do with the quote unquote racial makeup of the genetics that the other kids at this camp have, but you're taking them to a place that might be considered dangerous. And so the way it's framed though in this scenario is, which I think is the more realistic scenario, what I just described, but the way it's framed is that parents feel that this summer camp is not the best option because of racial tension. And they request a meeting. And so how would you calm the concerns of the parents? Maybe the parents have a legitimate concern, right? Like that's not even something that you entertain in this scenario. Like clearly the parents are wrong. That is the assumption from the beginning. So there you go. I think that it would be good if maybe this ends up getting into the hands of admins at Liberty University. You might want to just check out your church ministry's capstone class, CHMN 489, and see if this kind of thing is still being taught there. And if so, then maybe that it might be good to think about correcting that. So I do this in love, and I do this with the assumption that this kind of thing is will hopefully be dealt with at some point. So I still encourage, by the way, and I've said this before, I still encourage people, check out Liberty University. It's a city basically. So if you're looking for a place to send your students who want to go to college, then I'm not giving like a full endorsement, but I will say that like in the history department, I think I can pretty much fully endorse, but I'm not like giving a full endorsement for everything there. But it is a place to check out. And depending on the school, like, the School of Music, from what I understand, it's just excellent. Few know this, but if you listen to the podcast a while, you know that I did at one time do some work for Liberty, and I have my master's in history from Liberty. Liberty is a place I love dearly, and I used to go to a lot of concerts there and things that the music department put on. And so nothing at all against Liberty University. This could be any university. This could be any Christian college. I'm telling you, just about. It's almost across the board that way. All right. Well, let's talk about another Christian organization, shall we? Let's talk about Cru. Now, Cru is an organization I've spent a lot of time on, obviously, and they have a new president, David Robbins. July, so last month, he became president, and he was in charge of Family Life, which is one of Cru's ministries. And so I got an email. This is kind of a funny story, I guess, but I got an email from someone who immediately said, this is a positive development, or it was very positive about it. David Robbins is probably going to be better. He'll do the right thing. He'll help Cru, because Cru's had some real problems with LGBTQ normalization, with social justice stuff. Well, here's the thing. The very next day, literally less than 24 hours later, I'm pretty sure, I got an email from someone. And it totally disconnected, not even about David Robbins, but they just, and by the way, your emails are helpful for this reason. They wanted to let me know about Family Life and the email they got from Family Life. So this is the organization David Robbins oversaw. This document that I'm about to show you had to have been created, or at least the start of it, I think the whole thing probably, under David Robbins. Okay. This was released as he was ascending to the presidency of Cru. So, and it took work and time to put together. So this would have been under David Robbins. I'm sure that this document was put forward. And they sent it to me and they said, look, I got this email from Cru. And the email, if you scroll down, has a link. It says racial trauma, how to comfort a friend. Now, this is just a general email that sent out, racial trauma can cause powerful physical and emotional responses. Find ways to receive your friend's story with empathy and openness. Grab and download this. So the crew is putting this out, right? This is the crew that's not woke anymore. That, well, they say they never were, but they've gotten rid of this stuff. Well, they don't have lenses anymore. Okay, so here's the document. Let me just download this. We'll open the file. Okay. Here's the document. So, how to comfort a friend racial trauma. Racial trauma, it's the holistic response people of color experience. So, white people, I'm sorry. You do not have access to claiming the term racial trauma for yourself. It's prevented from being applied to you. It is a response that people of color, all caps, by the way, experience due to persistent acts of discrimination, bias, and even hate. Racial trauma and its aftermath are destructive forces to families and generations around the world. Now, I don't even have to read any more. You already know it's woke. You already know it's woke. How do you know it's woke? Because it's only something people of color experience. Oh, man. Receive your friend's story with empathy and openness rather than providing a one-stop shop for healing. Can be important step towards restoration. Galatians reminds us, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. As you seek to comfort your friend, hold space for the sorrow injustice brings. So it's developing the posture of listening and accepting. When someone who, and I guess not a white person, but a person of color comes to you and they have a story, you just got to accept it. You got to not just, this even it goes beyond listening, right? This is an empathy and an openness. You got to put yourselves in their shoes. That's empathy. And then you have to just be totally open. It could be, I guess, the most wild story, but you got to be open. The first service one owes to others in a community involves listening to them. Let's see. I'm going to skip down here because we don't have time to go through this whole thing. It's a Dietrich Bonhoeffer quote. All right. Establish trust, then extend the invitation. If you feel comfortable, I'd like to understand what happened to you. Would you feel like telling me your story? Pause before you respond, praying to invite the Holy Spirit to love your friend. So it gives you a flow sheet here. Validate their experience. There it is. Validate their experience. That sounds horrible. I hate that happened to you. Express your gratitude that your friend trusted you with the story of vulnerability. So you have to validate their experience. Well, what if their experience isn't true? What if they're falsely accusing other people of bigotry that they don't actually harbor? You just got to validate it according to this. Ask them these other questions. Would you feel comfortable telling me more? How did it make you feel? All that kind of stuff. Affirm your friend's God-given worth. So your culture, heritage, and race were treated like they were a weakness or something to be looked down on. But to me, they give you so much strength. I know more about God's character because I know as a person who bears his image. That could apply, I guess, to sub scenarios. I mean, look, everyone's got a background. Everyone's got a culture and things that define them. And, I think things that are part of the created order are good. You shouldn't castigate those things. But look, if someone's coming from a community, let's say, or a family, you could have a family as the example here, and it's just really broken and messed up, right? And you probably have to be careful about saying that kind of thing. Maybe their family isn't great. Maybe the community they came from isn't the greatest for them. And maybe this is something that they have to overcome, and you're going to help them overcome it. That could also be something you say to someone. Look, you've got some damaging things from the culture you came up with in wherever that was. And it sounds like your family had issues, and the society that existed around you was encouraging sin, and you were involved in it. And look, I'm going to help you. I'm here because I'm going to help you. I got sin in my own heart, but we want to bring you to a more stable place. We want to help you. And that's very different than what they're saying here. Encourage them to take the space they need to heal and grieve. It's just, the whole thing is just very therapeutic. If it becomes hard to listen to your friend, realize this is a normal feeling. Assess your own emotions and ask yourself why you might be reacting this way. If it feels hard to believe something so different from your own experience, realize your reality may be very different from your friends. That could have been phrased better. Consider how you could continue learning about experiences like theirs. Wow, this is so manipulative. 1 Corinthians 12. talks about the gifts in the body of Christ, right? It says, particularly as Christians, none of us can say, I don't need you. When one of us suffers, we all suffer. So, yeah, like if someone has a spiritual gift, you can't say that you don't need their spiritual gift, which is what that's talking about. It's not talking about like, I don't need you because of your ethnic or cultural background. So the way they apply verses here is bizarre to me. Okay, what not to say? How not to respond? It says invalidation and minimizing of impact. This happens to everyone. So if you tell someone this happens to everyone, then you don't say that. Now, by the way, I will say I have had to hear in my life things like that. When I have gone through really hard things, I have needed someone to say, you know what, this is life. This happens. Life. What's the line from The Princess Bride? Life is pain, right? Maybe it's not quite that bad, but we are called by Jesus to bear our cross every day. There's going to be pain in life. And sometimes you do need to hear that, but they're saying not to say that. Disbelief that it's race. What does Paul even say? Do not be surprised when the fiery affliction comes to you. I mean, come on. All right. Disbelief that it's racism, asking a lot of questions. Okay. I'm sure they were stressed and you just happened to be there. So, okay. So don't try to sometimes you need this too, though. Someone's reading someone else wrong. They treated you rudely. It had nothing to do with bigotry. Maybe they were having a bad day. And sometimes, I'm not saying for every scenario, this is going to range, but they're just ruling these things out. Highlighting of innocent intentions. Like I think that was their intention, trying to get in their heads of the culprit. Rush to problem solving. Some of this stuff is not necessarily unwise. Like if I just preached on last Sunday, we're supposed to admonish the unruly, encourage the faint-hearted, help the weak, be patient with all. So there are times when if it's someone who's truly faint-hearted and they're not ready for maybe some admonishment, let's say they're, let's say you can't validate, you don't know. It's just someone just sharing a story. There's no way to validate or invalidate anything. Probably not good to just start questioning it necessarily. But if you know more, sometimes you do need to do that. Defending the status quo, personal defensiveness. Okay. Don't do any of those things. Be sensitive with your desire to apologize. There's a therapist. Wow. Okay. It was therapeutic. There's a therapist and author, Shadeen Francis, that states in How to Talk with Your Black Friends About Race. An apology without action is empty. So to apologize for racism, that is not, here we go. I don't know what to say. So I guess you're going to apologize for racism that you're a white person. I guess that makes you guilty. Apologize for racism that is not new and that you benefit from. There you go. It's racism because you're benefiting from it. It doesn't actually serve the goal of being supportive. And it feels like the other person's responsibility to somehow make that right by saying it's fine. Okay, so I guess you have to. Okay, so this is what they're saying. If you're going to apologize, you got to have action behind it. You can't just apologize because then they're obligated to forgive you, and that would be terrible. Oh my goodness! Can you believe this is right now? This is Cru. This is Cru right now, formerly Campus Crusade for Christ. This isn't Cru from 2019. This isn't Cru from 2020. This is Cru 2024, right? Put out by Family Life, the organization that the current president of Cru, David Robbins, oversaw. And this document would have been created when David Robbins was still in charge of that organization. So make of that what you will. But Cru is not out of the woods at all. All right. Let's talk about one more organization making actually a positive stride. Let me give you some good news. You want some good news today? I think we should have some good news. So we're going to talk about the Church of the Nazarene and the Church of the Nazarene. So this is, I'll start here. I talked about this before on the podcast. This is not ancient history. This is from actually one day less than a year ago. So this is from 364 days, I think, ago. The Nazarene Nat is the account on Facebook. And the Nazarene Nat revealed that Pastor Jay Ord and Alexa Ord have a book that they published previously, but they have a second edition that was coming out at the time. And the title of the book is Why the Church of the Nazarene Should Have a Conversation About Being LGBTQ plus Affirming. Okay, I don't need to say anything more. I don't need to show you anything more. I did that on a previous podcast, but just so you know who Thomas J. Oord is, this is the kind of thing that he's promoting. Now, good news from a very, very leftist source, which is Baptist News Global. I mean, Mark Wingfield is way out. Like, you can't even see him. He's so far left, in my opinion. You read his stuff, it's just, hey, but this is the news organization that covered the matter. Expelled from his own denomination, Oord still holds out hope for change. So he was expelled. A Nazarene pastor and professor who was labeled a heretic and expelled from membership in his denomination told Baptist News Global that he still has hope for the church of his childhood to break free of impulses toward legalism. Oh, he literally contradicted Nazarene doctrine. Okay. He literally went against it. So it goes on and says what you would expect. But I wanted to point something out here. I think it's about this guy. Is it about this guy? Selden D. Kelly. Let me see. Yes, I think so. So this is another story. This is from July. I think these are both from both from July. Nazarene, this story came out before that one. Nazarene cracks down on LGBTQ welcoming leaders. So who's one of those leaders? Not just Thomas J. Oord, who's, is obvious, but this other guy, D. Kelly. Among the Nazarenes, D. Kelly. I think that's the guy that I want to talk about. Yeah. Is it D. Kelly? Well, I'll just read it. It says, he served as pastor of San Diego First Baptist. Ha! I'm so used to talking about Baptist. San Diego First Church of the Nazarene for 17 years, was found guilty of teaching that contradicts the church doctrine. He wrote an essay in Thomas J. Oord's book. So the book that I just showed you, he wrote an essay in. So it was on that basis that he was kicked out. He said, I'm currently prohibited from joining two people in same-sex matrimony. I can't imagine withholding blessing, encouragement, counsel of love. Yeah, I can. I mean, God can. All right. And then there is this guy, Rick Power. All right. This is the guy I want to talk about. Rick Power, a Nazarene pastor and leader for 46 years, resigned in April from his job as superintendent of the church's Hawaii Pacific District after being asked to do so. His crime was failing to discipline his daughter, Rachel. Now, listen to the way that sounds. To discipline his daughter, Rachel, a part-time district employee who had officiated at a same-sex wedding 5 years earlier. Power's resignation is enough for some critics who filed accusations against him. A committee has been formed to investigate the accusations. Now, apparently, that was not an insider told me, hey, this is not the full story. The way that the whole thing's framed is to make you think these guys are big victims. But here's this is a guy named Will Campbell, which apparently, I guess, is the son-in-law, so I'm told, of this gentleman here, Rick Power, and he was the so I guess this is what's happening on the ground in the Nazarene church. So it's like an onion. There's many layers to this, and apparently this factored in. But Will Campbell is the older brother of a guy named Evan Campbell, and he was an honorary groomsman and the officiant of this particular wedding. What particular wedding? This particular wedding. I almost don't want to show you the video. It is so offensive, and we're not going to play any more of it. But you can. Yeah, there you go. That's enough. So you can see what's. Well, I guess none of you could see any of that, could you? I guess I was showing my own face. Sorry. Here's the articles that I'm talking about. Here's Thomas J. Oord. Here's the book he wrote, Why the Church of the Nazarene Should Have a Conversation About Being LGBTQ Affirming. And then, here's D. Kelly, and then here's Rick Power. And then the video of the wedding that Will Campbell, who apparently is his son-in-law, officiated, is right here. So sorry, none of you could see that. I was showing my own face and I didn't realize it. So this is what's going on in the Church of the Nazarene. And this is why they've cracked down some. And I would say good for them. Good for the Church of the Nazarene. I'm glad that they're actually upholding their own doctrine. Now, see this for what it is. This is not some kind of an advance. This is a defense. This is saying we're not going to bend on this issue. And in my opinion, it's taken them probably too long. But but they're doing it. Okay. And I realize every denomination has, like, the PCA to me is so, it takes so long in the PCA to do anything. And maybe the Nazarenes are like that too. So, maybe I'm bringing my Baptist sensibilities to this, or my non-denominational sensibilities, and saying it should be so much shorter than this. Guy running around for years as a pastor in your denomination, publishing things against your doctrinal statement. Shouldn't that be taken care of fairly quickly? Well, it's being taken care of. And whether sooner or later, I say good for them. And I'm glad for the Nazarene Church that they're taking a stand on at least this issue. It's a really, really good thing. So let's celebrate that. Let's thank the Lord for that tonight. As you say your nightly prayers, say, thank you, Lord, that the Church of the Nazarene isn't like so many of these other denominations. They actually held firm to their doctrine under a lot of pressure. And so I want to say good on them. Now, I do have a number of other things that I want to talk about, and I am looking at the time. We've already been going 40 minutes. Should I do it, or should I save it? What do you guys think? Because we could talk about some stuff tomorrow. So I will get to some questions, and then you can let me know if you think that I should keep going or we should just do one tomorrow. I am willing to do either. So Steve Cruz says, I graduated from Liberty University, and even back then there were several liberal issues. Oh yeah. I mean, I saw it when I've done podcasts on it, and somewhat, I'll just say I've ruffled some feathers inside the school because I've talked about some of the things, but I also know the dynamics there. And I'm just telling you guys, it's not just Liberty, it's most places. There's a tendency for some reason to, and there's exceptions, but there is a tendency to respond to outside pressure more so. They don't like it when people talk about them in public settings and when there's negative things attached to what they're doing. And, if organizations weren't like that, if Liberty University wasn't like that, if there wasn't more of an approachability, I would say, in the mechanisms of leadership, if there was a way that, like, I really, if I would, let's say I was a president of Liberty University, which I'm not, and I never will be, but I would want some kind of especially given what happened in 2020, reporting mechanism. Like, we're not woke here. We're not social justice, whatever, we're anti-CRT statement, which I don't think they do have, but I would have a statement. I would actually put it in the statement of faith somewhere. And then have a mechanism for students to report those things and have it not affect their grade. That's what I would do, personally speaking, because students in these places do not have much of a voice oftentimes. And I can give you, if I wanted to, names and examples of that, where students they go through the proper channels and they just don't get anywhere, and they're given the runaround. And so yeah, I mean, I've seen that too. And that seems to be what organizations tend to respond to more. Unfortunately, I hate that. I hate that that's the case. Well, August says he's not traveling to Yankee Land. Well, you're missing out. Yankee Land has some very beautiful scenery, and there's some really rural areas where there's not a lot of Yankees. It's just like rocks and deer. So, let's see here. Other questions. I'm looking for questions specifically. Tim Miller says the homosexual couple is probably up to no good with those kids. If I were a pastor in that situation, the one I mentioned earlier, from the Liberty University assignment, I would need to help those kids get away from the abuse and hopefully bring them to justice. Possibility. Can you imagine, though, if that was on the question? You notice a homosexual couple, and stats say that homosexual couples are more likely to abuse their children. What do you do as a pastor? Would they ever? It almost makes more sense, though, to have that question than the one they actually asked, though, right? All right, referring to the church question, even the presupposition that church services are primarily evangelical opportunities instead of gathering together believers totally bugs me. I didn't mention that, but you have to make a good point that, how's it going to look? Church is for, who cares? This is for believers. Believers, we're on the same page. We should be as believers. We have God's holy word. It tells us qualifications for ministry. So, my church has a sign, believers meeting in his name, but we have plenty of lost people visiting. That's the way it should be, right? We want lost people visiting. That's what they need. Here for the Crusades. Did I miss? No, you didn't. All right, I guess I'm going to do it. I guess I'm going to talk about the Crusades a little bit. I'm not going to go into detail. I'm probably going to do a whole episode with someone who really knows what they're talking about. I've read, I did a course in my undergrad, so I'm going back now over a decade, but I did a course on Islam, and as part of that course, I had to study the Crusades, and of course, during that time, I remember, because it was at a secular university, I got, I think Richard Spencer wrote it, but the Politically Incorrect Guide to Islam. And I know some guys really don't like Richard Spencer, but it was short, and it just gave me some facts. And I still recommend it to people who are in those situations, who don't have a lot of time. Like, yeah, it's not like a super scholarly secondary source, but it's a good pop resource, I suppose, to just show you, hey, like the narrative you're told about the Crusades, not exactly accurate. But we're going to talk about we'll talk about the controversy over the Crusades just a little bit. So, do you plan to address the anti-Christian nationalist crowd slandering Eric Kahn as a racist? So I haven't seen everything on this. I've seen a little bit. I think K-Dub, I think he's still going by that name. I questioned him. I remember he had posted something on Eric Kahn, because Eric Kahn, I'll just summarize this. This doesn't take long. Eric Kahn quoted Aristotle, and Aristotle was talking about how multi-ethnic communities tend to be more unstable. That's really what it came down to. And K-Dub took great offense at this and started saying that, I think the thing I took objection to was he said, like, all racists will go to hell, or something along those lines. And it seemed that he was applying that to Eric Kahn. And I just thought, for agreeing with that statement, he doesn't have the gospel. He's going to hell. Like, how can you say that? Like that's what I'm used to coming from the woke social justice crowd, is they will add things to the gospel and say that if you don't jump this high and meet our bar, even if you have the gospel, you really don't, because this is somehow, part of it somehow. And they finagle ways to make, they make the gospel somehow multicultural, multi-ethnic, and you can't say anything against multi-ethnicity because all kinds of people can be saved, which has really nothing to do with the kinds of societies in the temporal world that are set up for the good of people. That's a spiritual reality, but these categories are conflated. And I would say Aristotle is in the main right about the fact that you insert, really think about it this way, you insert more people who have differences into a situation, whether it's a playpen, you have too many children and they have different interests and different habits that they formed at their homes about how you play with toys, you're going to have some problems. So you can go right down to, I have a daughter, so I'm thinking in these terms. So you have, a little daughter, the most basic unit, all the way up to nations and empires. And you say, you have too much diversity, it doesn't end up being our strength. That's really all he was saying. And I would tend to agree with that. I'll defend Eric on that. Like he wasn't doing anything in danger of hellfire there, as far as I know. Hi, John. When do you stop talking about liberal ideas to people in the church? Do you plow ahead when it offends? Man, it depends on a lot of circumstances. Are you the pastor? If you're the pastor, you never stop. If you're someone who's in the congregation and you see leadership doing some things that are wrong, you will probably come to a point of having to leave the church eventually if there's no movement, right? If you confront the issue and nothing happens. So, did I say Richard Spencer? Someone's correcting me and saying it's Robert Spencer. I must have said Richard Spencer. Apparently Rich, is he a neo-Nazi? Richard Spencer was the alt-right guy, right? From 2016. I remember, because I didn't know what alt-right was. And people kept saying alt-right. And eventually I think I looked it up and I'm like, oh, Richard Spencer, that's who they're talking about. So sorry if I mistakenly said Richard Spencer. I meant Robert Spencer. Okay. And last comment before we will move on. I'll make it a mega episode. Truttle says, the point was about specifically democracy as a form of government, not even society overall per se. Okay. I guess the point Eric was making was about democracy. So in a democracy, it's not good to have, even more so, I guess, at that point. If you have all these competing interests in a democracy, then it becomes, the farther apart those competing interests are, the harder it is to have unity and actually face commonly shared threats. So, All right. So yes, sorry. People are writing in about the Spencer. Yes, I meant Robert Spencer. Sorry. All right. We're going to keep going. We'll just do it. The computer's still working. Thank God. So let's start. Where do I want to start? Let's talk about abortion a little bit. The abortion debate, abortion, abolitionism, and all that. No, you know what? Before I do this, let me play for you some clips, just so you know kind of what the debate's over. Donald Trump put out a post. This was on Truth Social, and he basically just said, like, my administration is going to be good for women's reproductive rights, which was a terrible thing, in my opinion, to say, because you're not. I think in his mind, he's probably doing something strategic. He's trying to woo people who are concerned about anti-abortion to the Republican Party to vote. Because let's face it, it's looking dismal right now. A few weeks ago, it looked pretty good, like the chances, and it's not looking the same. So I think he probably thought of it in that way. But saying that also signals to your pro-life constituency that you don't really care about them, because anytime we hear the term women's reproductive rights, we're thinking this is abortion. That's when we hear it. That's when we see it. Well, here's what Donald Trump had to say about his comments.
What led you to post about women's reproductive rights this morning? Has your stance on abortion changed?
No, very good. I'm very strong on.
And for some reason, I don't have any sound. So he says he's going to be good for reproductive rights. The IVF is very strong. I mean, we're leaders in it. And I think people are seeing
and that's what they've wanted for
this.
years. For 52 years, they've wanted votes to be taken by the states, and they wanted Roe v. Wade to be brought into the states.
Okay, I made a mistake. I didn't have my headphones plugged in, so I started interpreting it for you while he was talking. I guess you could hear what he was saying. He's saying, in case I interrupted him, my apologies, that what he meant is that we're very strong on IVF and we're going to leave abortion to the states, and that means I'm strong on reproductive health rights. So essentially, he thinks federalism is the solution to the abortion question, at least for now, and he wants IVF to be available. So, yes, thank you, Avers. You do have sound. I didn't have sound. So, hey, DC Harris, you should. Oh, do I have it? I don't have it. You're a Harris, so I'm a Harris too, and I will show it in the next podcast, Lord willing. I have a shirt that says Harris is against Harris. It's a great shirt. So anyway, Trump says this is what I mean by it. So he's not saying I'm going to be like I'm going to be pro-choice and like overturn what I just did with appointing judges who overturn Roe v. Wade. He's not saying I want a national law to codify abortion. Essentially, he's not really going to touch much policy-wise. I don't think this is all rhetoric, to be honest with you. I don't think actually any of this means anything policy-wise yet. I haven't seen any, and I've asked this on X for people who are upset about these comments, and I understand why they would be, but like, where's the policy prescription? The Harris administration has their policies written and ready to go. Where's the Trump administration's policy that's pushing the needle in a more pro-choice, pro-abortion direction? I don't see it. And so his comment was just, it was a politician trying to appeal to a constituency. That's all it was. JD Vance.
One of the most important issues for the conservative movement is the right to life, right? If you're not willing to stand up for unborn babies in this country, then what else are you going to cut tail and run on when the going gets tough?
Okay, so people are sharing this clip from I think it's 2 years ago when JD Vance was running for Senate, and look how conservative he was. What happened? Or maybe it was 4 years ago. I can't remember. But look, he was really solidly pro-life. And then they see this clip of him.
Big issue. It was talked about at the Democratic National Convention. It's being talked about on the campaign trail. Abortion. Sure. Democrats made the case this week and beyond this week that Donald Trump, if elected, will impose a federal ban on abortion if he wins. Now, Donald Trump says he won't, but can you commit, Senator, sitting right here with me today, that if you and Donald Trump are elected, that you will not impose a federal ban on abortion?
I can absolutely commit that, Kristen, and Donald Trump has been as clear about that as possible. I think it's important to step back and say,
What has Donald Trump actually said on the abortion question, and how is it different from what Kamala Harris and the Democrats have said? Donald Trump wants to end this culture war over this particular topic. If California wants to have a different abortion policy from Ohio, then Ohio has to respect California and California has to respect Ohio. Donald Trump's view is that we want the individual states and their individual cultures and their unique political sensibilities to make these decisions, because we don't want to have a nonstop federal conflict over this issue. The federal government ought to be focused on getting food prices down, getting housing prices down, issues, of course, where Kamala Harris has been a total disaster. So I think Donald Trump is right. We want the federal government to focus on these big economic and immigration questions. Let the states figure out their own abortion policy.
Let me just follow up with you a little bit on that point, because I've been talking to Republicans, including Senator Lindsey Graham just last week, who've made it very clear that if Donald Trump is elected, if you are elected, they will continue to press this point. Senator Graham said to me, I'm going to keep saying that there should be a federal ban. If such a piece of legislation landed on Donald Trump's desk, would he veto it?
Well, I think it'd be very clear he would not support it. I mean, he said that explicitly. Yeah, I mean, if you're not supporting it as the President of the United States, you fundamentally have to veto it.
So he would veto a federal abortion ban?
I think he would. He said that explicitly that he would. And
I don't
again,
think he's ever said explicitly he would. He said that to you?
Lindsey Graham, Kristen, I would be surprised. I mean, again, I need to see the context on what Lindsey Graham said, because Lindsey Graham himself has not advocated a federal abortion ban. Lindsey Graham has advocated a federal minimum standard. Now, to be clear, that is not Donald Trump's view. Donald Trump disagrees with Lindsey Graham on this, but no Republican, at least no Republican with any reasonable power, is saying that we should have a complete national abortion ban. I haven't heard that from any of my colleagues. And to be clear, Donald Trump, I think, has staked his position and made it very explicit. He wants this to be a state decision. States are going to make this determination themselves.
All right.
Okay, I wanted you to hear the whole context of that, because the clip is normally cut off, but he goes on to say, hey, look, Lindsey Graham doesn't even want a federal abortion ban. No one in any position of power wants a total federal abortion ban. And I'm going to tell you something. I think he's probably right. I think he's probably right on that. I don't like it any more than you do, especially the earlier comments about him thinking this is the right approach. But I think to win the election, it's kind of like the situation that the Democrats were in when Obama was elected, I think, in some ways, where Obama had to signal all this like pro-traditional marriage stuff. But then when he got in, what did he effectively do with the DOJ? Like, they weren't defending anything traditional. They did everything they could to foil efforts to defend traditional marriage. And I think it may be something similar with the Trump administration. Why do I say that? Well, because when someone like J.D. Vance, who's pro-life, that term has a bit of a broad range. It applies to people who are for regulations on abortion and strict regulations. It also applies to people, though, who want total bans and all of that. This is something that has united a group of people against Roe v. Wade for years. And that was, I think, the common enemy. And now that Roe v. Wade is kind of out of the way, and this is a state issue more than anything else, the divisions are, I'm not saying there weren't divisions before, but the divisions are becoming more pronounced over what people actually do want on this subject, whether they want to regulate it, totally ban it. If they want to regulate it, how do they want to regulate it? At what level? So when you have the vice presidential candidate saying that he is pro-life, and the Democrats are not, and they're radical, and you can't trust them to protect life, I think when I hear that, and at least what I want to hear is from conception. I don't know if that's actually true, though, especially given what he said about abortion pills. He seems to have a view that I don't know, because he hasn't said it publicly, but he may not be a conception guy. He may think it's a heartbeat or something. Now, another question, the political question is, what does this mean policy-wise? What does this mean? Has anything actually changed policy-wise? And I would say, I don't think so. In fact, before I started this, I was reading the Republican National Convention statement, the platform from 2016. And if you remember, that was the platform also in 2020, because they didn't have a platform. So the 2016 platform, if you read it, it has certain abortion regulations, but it does not call for a ban on federal abortion, even in that document. And if you look at the Republican Party, I would encourage you, go read the Republican Party platforms from 2016, 2012, 2008. They all assume this Roe v. Wade status quo that they're reacting to. That's not there anymore. And so pro-life organizations, anti-abortion organizations, and this would include the abolitionist organizations and stuff, this was something I don't think any of them expected. And now we have a situation. Let me just show you what the situation is. According to stats, at least, if you believe those, I guess. Some people are questioning every poll right now, which I understand because of what they say about Trump. But if you look at some of these stats, someone posted this, Conjunction 77 posted this on X, and it shows the different views over time. Evangelicalism, mainline denominations, Black Protestants, Catholic, other faiths, and no religion at all. And where basically, if they think if a woman should be able to obtain a legal abortion if she wants one for any reason, okay? This is like unlimited abortion, radical stuff, okay? Where are people at? Well, it looks like it's evangelicals. It's like, that's pretty crazy to me that it says it's almost like 30%. Catholics, it's like 50%. Other faiths, it's way over. No religion at all is the highest. I mean, that's approaching, we're at like 75, 76%, it looks like. And then amazingly for Black Protestants who went, it looks like in 1980, from not being very supportive of this, around the 25% mark, I suppose. They were kind of in a similar spot, it looks like, to where evangelicals were. They are very supportive now. It looks like around 65%, according to these graphs. So the direction that all these graphs are going in is up. So much for the whole, we're the pro-life generation. I keep hearing that, people are becoming more pro-life, but look at what these graphs are saying. I don't think that's the case. Here's another, here's Pew Research, and they had, I don't know what I wanted to show you from this now. I hope I have the right thing up. Let's see. It's a majority, maybe this is it. A majority of the U.S. public disapproves of the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. About 6 in 10 adults disapprove of the court's decision. Wow. Including 43% who strongly disapprove. These are the conditions that Trump and Vance are trying to win in. They're trying to win in a country that has chosen sexual anarchy, that has chosen perversion. Not everyone, not every Bible Belt area, not every rural area, but enough people that it's the majority. And I'm sure that their advisors are telling them, look, if you you have to, on this issue, you probably just have to play defense. You can't push it any farther. And not that Trump has ever been a huge pro-life guy. He's done more for pro-life people than any other president, I guess, in my lifetime. But that's never been like his thing. And even I didn't want to vote for him in 2016, partially because I thought, hey, the Republican Party is going to be corrupted by his stance on homosexuality and abortion and all that. And we're downstream from that. We're so far downstream from that at this point. Now I'm like, man, if he doesn't win the election, we don't have, we may even be past this point. We don't have another election. They're going to have, the Democrats will have solid majorities indefinitely from illegal migrants. I remember I was born in California. I still have a lot of family there. I saw what happened to that state. You went from Reagan to Republicans will never win anything because of this. And yeah, so that's what I'm looking at. Is that going to happen nationwide over the whole country? So it's a different set of conditions that I think we're in some ways than we were in 2016. But yeah, I think these are the realities I think they are trying to probably deal with. And so let's see, which one did I want to go for? So there's 2 things I was going to point out because I've talked about this some on X, but the first thing, we'll just talk about the abortion abolitionists for a moment. I couldn't find it. Ben Crenshaw wrote a great article. Maybe it was a long Twitter post where he basically says, look, at least in this election, sitting out the election is not really a political decision. And he makes the point that it is a decision from conscience, and that may be perfectly respectable, but don't fool yourself into thinking this is a meaningful political decision. One person's going to win. It is either going to be Kamala Harris or it is going to be Donald Trump, one or the other. And I do think there are some guys who are very ardently anti-abortion who see how high the stakes are, that they will never be able to even work on the state level if Kamala Harris gets in. If the Democrats have 4 more years and they're able to secure majorities indefinitely to continue winning national elections, continue putting pro-choice, pro-abortion candidates in, you can say goodbye to even making progress on the state level, which is something under Trump that you can actually do. You can make progress on the state level. So there's a guy who's running, I'm going to find out his name in a moment, but he's running for president under the Constitution Party. And here's what he had to say. And this, by the way, this guy founded Operation Rescue. And here's what he had to say.
I'm Randall Terry, Constitution Party candidate for president, and I'm on the ballot this November in 12 states, and it won't hurt Trump because I'm not running to win. I'm running to cause Kamala to lose with targeted campaign ads. Here's the issue. Social media platforms don't have to run our campaign ads.
Okay, he goes on to basically say, look, and Randall Terry, of course, that was his name. Okay, so he's saying, I can run these ads because the networks are required in many of these swing states on news channels. Social media people aren't going to take our stuff, but the news organizations have to. And I'm going to target Democrats and basically show them how radical Kamala Harris is. And this is a guy who's ardently anti-abortion. And so this is one, and I don't know if he calls himself an abolitionist. I don't know what terms he used for what he believes, but this is one, I think, wing, if you want to call it that, of the abolitionists. And so I describe them here, and I've just noticed this online. There's 2 kinds of anti-abortionists who call themselves abolitionists. The first type is pragmatic, frustrated with the pro-life establishment, views abortion as a grave evil, holds mothers accountable, and seeks to end it through existing political channels without exceptions for rape or incest. I would assume that Randall Terry's probably in that camp if he calls himself that. There's a second type of ideologically driven abolitionists who see the pro-life establishment as worse than the left, insist on immediate action regardless of political feasibility, and rejects any compromise. They withhold support from non-aligned anti-abortion candidates, vilify differing strategies, and prioritize the issue above all else, even if it means accelerating the country's demise. I'm not going to give you examples. I've seen a number of examples, though, on X this week from people saying, basically, if this causes Trump to lose and we withhold our vote, then so be it. The country deserves judgment. Oh, well. Some even seeming almost like they want that. And I'm just going to tell you, as a husband and father, I do not want that. I understand reality. I understand that we are already under judgment, and we probably will incur much more judgment, but it's not something I want. It's not something I'm going to fight as hard as I can to uphold moral standards, prevent judgment, give an opportunity. And it's not just on the abortion issue, but on the abortion issue, give an opportunity for anti-abortion activists and lawmakers to work on the state level to get this not just limited. The goal is to ban it. Even if it's in all 50 places, one by one, get this thing banned. But I understand, I think, why the Trump administration would be taking the approach they're taking. One of the things Kamala Harris is promising to do is to sign an abortion law that would basically codify Roe v. Wade in law, which the Supreme Court's, what are they going to do about that? I mean, it's going to make it much more difficult if that ever happens. That's not something you have to worry about under Trump. He's not, he's, I think, as liberal as he's been on this issue, the most liberal he's been is invoking federalism and just saying, I want pre-Roe conditions, basically, which is what that is. Before Roe v. Wade, you had different states with different laws on this topic. I'm not saying that's a preferable arrangement, but that is the arrangement we had under the Constitution, basically. And I'll just quickly say this. Maybe I should do a whole episode at some point, but there are people who are saying a lot of things that just are civically, as far as civics are concerned, I don't think accurate about this. Like, hey, it's a crime to murder. Right. It is a crime. And this is actually more of a recent thing, by the way. It's a federal crime to murder under certain circumstances. Or I should say murders become a federal issue under certain circumstances when it involves things like drug smuggling across state lines. So it's the interstate commerce clause that makes it a federal issue in that kind of a case. Or unfortunately, things like hate crimes, that becomes a federal issue because of federal laws on that. Now, you could try to extend that to the unborn, But you're extending something. You could fight for that in theory. I don't think you're going to get far, but if you fought for that in theory, you would be getting what you would end up doing is extending something that probably should have never been extended, because we shouldn't really have hate crimes legislation. I say, though, as long as we have, if we're going to have it, we should use it, right? To like, I agree with that kind of logic, but I think a better option is like, we shouldn't have that. It's kind of like the whole public school debate. Like, we shouldn't really have public schools that have federal funding, but as long as we're going to have them, let's make sure that they're not, pumping evil things into our children's minds or the minds of the children next door, So it's not ideal. And then, the other thing is that the 14th Amendment arguments, which I think if you just look at the historical context, the way the 14th Amendment was passed, what it was passed to address, it's not about this issue. And you would have to do and there are smart lawyers who want to do some maneuvering to make it about this issue. And if you at least are honest about it and say, like, we're not going to follow original intent on this, we really are just going to try to use this to wield power. And we're, the left does this with the 14th Amendment. We're going to try to do it. At least just be honest about what you're doing. That's what I would say. These things are not as simple, I think, as some anti-abortion folks online want to make them. And politically, like I just showed you, the situation is pretty dismal. So the best option, this is the white pill, I suppose. The best option we have right now to forward a pro-life cause is to vote for Donald Trump, because if he loses, then you are going to probably get, if not in this next term, when they have permanent majorities because of illegal aliens coming in and that kind of thing, you will eventually get the abortion law that codifies it nationally. Okay. So you want Trump to win, and if you want to make it illegal, and you also want to put resources at the state level. You want to look at red states like Oklahoma, like Idaho, places where you already have a lot of Republicans and at least a voter base. Even if the Republican establishment is corrupt, you have a voter base that really does want this. And if you can locate those areas and start start running Christian candidates who, like a Dusty Deevers, get more Dusty Deevers into the state Senate or representative body, that's the way that you're going to start knocking this stuff down. And it's going to be one by one by one. But that's how and I guess that is I just thought about this. Like, abolitionists can totally get on board with that. That's what they are doing, I guess. They're trying to do that on the state level. But that is kind of an incremental approach in a way, right? Because you're one by one knocking these things down, trying to build momentum. And, that's the kind of thing that happened too when we saw at different conditions, but we saw this with the same-sex marriage issue. Remember, it initially started, it was courts doing it primarily, but it was state by state by state. And they just kept building momentum off of these political victories or court victories they would have in these states, which eventually turned into political victories, which eventually turned into national. And I would say take a page out of their playbook on that. That's probably how it's going to work more than anything else. So that's my opinion on this. I think that for the sake of my neighbors who are my pagan neighbors who want to kill their children are doing evil in the sight of the Lord, but they're not killing my child. And with my vote, I need to steward it to the best of my ability for my people, my family, my child. And on this issue of abortion, I need to ensure that the party of death that is going to codify abortion at a national level does not win and get what they want indefinitely for the future. So this is political reality. This is political reality I think we have to deal with. If someone out there wants to say, no, my conscience says I can't do that, go with your conscience. I would try to persuade you to argue your conscience into being okay with a Donald Trump victory over a Kamala Harris victory. But if your conscience is really screaming at you, just don't do that. But just don't fool yourself into thinking this is like a profound political statement. I don't think it is. And if it was successful, it would mean Kamala Harris. So that's where I'm at with this. Yeah, someone says Joel Webben had a similar argument. Yeah, probably. I think Joel and I are probably pretty close on this. I had Joel on a while back with some other. I had Andrew Isker, and I also had Pastor Kerry Gordon. And Pastor Kerry Gordon is very against Trump. And so he makes the point that basically we should withhold our vote. And Joel made the point on that particular show that we should not. So that's where I'm coming down on it. That's how I'm thinking about it. I don't think that we live in a perfect world, and a lot of the decisions we make are prudential decisions. We're looking at reality and we're trying to navigate it, and to the best of our ability with the power that we have, which unfortunately for anti-abortionists, we don't have a whole lot. We're part of a coalition. We have a seat at the table in the Trump administration. We have no seat with Kamala Harris. But with the little power we do have, how do we make gains? That's the question. All right. So that said, I'm willing to take pushback if anyone has questions about this. Truth Seeker asks if white men are excluded from all advertising, even among Christian advertisers. You must be looking back at something I showed earlier. I don't know. It seems like that way, doesn't it? It does seem that way. Okay. Where are we going next? We got other stuff to talk about here. All right. I'll mention this briefly. We're not leaving the abortion thing. I was just going to mention this, that the pro-life lobby has been telling us we're the pro-life generation since I can remember. They've also been saying they've been acting like it's inevitable because slavery was overturned. Chattel slavery was done away with. So it's inevitable that abortion is like the same issue or so similar. It's going to be overturned. That's the logic. And so they'll say like it's very racist, right? Like Planned Parenthood is very racist, abortion is very racist, and trying to convince people to join them as if that's a point. And I'm telling you, I've said this forever. That is not a point in your corner. It's not what you think. The left doesn't hear that and think, oh my goodness, it is racist. I guess I'll rethink my position on abortion. Doesn't work. For them, you're making actually, like they would say the exact opposite to you using the same stats. They would say that you would say there's more access in these urban areas where minorities live for abortion. And that means it's racist. They want to kill babies that are of different colors. And they'll come back and say, there's not enough access in these urban areas, therefore it's racist. Because they, by definition, you're starting from different places. They think abortion access is healthcare, and you need healthcare access that is proportionate to the populations that live in the country. So minorities need access, and if there should be more access to abortion in urban areas, right? That's what they would say. So this is just my whole thing. I said, look, the idea that abortion is racism because a disproportionate amount of blacks and Latino people kill their children at higher rates than whites only works if you think disparities equal racism. It seems to me that anti-abortion organizations have infiltrated themselves with CRT consistent logic for years. So obviously you could talk about like Margaret Sanger and all of that. I understand all that. But if the logic you're using, which is what I often hear, is like, look at the disproportionate this or that, then that doesn't by definition mean racism. And what you're doing is whatever racism is, what you're doing though, is you're infiltrating yourselves. You're priming your people to accept left-wing ideas because you're hinging the morality of abortion on a disparity. You're not just saying it's murder, it's wrong, we should stop. You're saying, no, it's wrong because it affects this demographic differently than this. So many people reacted, and the predictable stuff, a lot of it, it is racist, and the programming is very strong. I understand, and it's because Margaret Sanger this and that, and I get that. Here's what I said though. I said many of the reactions to this post are understandable given the years this narrative has been hammered. There are three things I want people to consider though. First, Sanger had a problem with unfit whites too. Why is it that never mentioned? And I actually posted some examples of this where she talks about this. Second, Latinos have higher abortion rates than whites. Are we to assume they are also victims of a modern anti-minority and racist Planned Parenthood? In other words, Margaret Sanger wasn't talking about Latinos, right? We're talking 100 years ago. Latinos have been more, in large groups, a recent larger demographic that takes advantage of this particular and evil service. So what does that mean? Is it Planned Parenthood? They're using the service more. Is that because Planned Parenthood's targeting them because they're white supremacists? That doesn't really seem to make sense. Third, if the Black community by and large welcomes abortion, 90% of Black self-professing Christians allegedly vote Democrat. Even if Singer wanted to kill their children through the Negro Project, what's keeping them supportive today? And I just showed you for Black Christians, it's not much better. You know, it's like what, 80% of like Black Christians, something. What did I say? I have to go back to the stat here. Looks like, okay, so not that, like 65%. So, and that's the ones who call themselves Christians, right? So like, so yeah, as I understand, I guess, so it's like, what is it? 90% of Black self-professing Christians. I guess that's Christians too. So you have a gap there of 25% who are, I guess, Christians who are pro-life, but still vote Democrat, I guess. I don't get it, but that's what you got. So even if Singer wanted to kill their children through the Negro Project, what's keeping them supportive today? This is a question that I'd like to see answered. No one's putting a gun to anyone's head. Well, the government's not doing this and saying, go get an abortion. There might be pimps and people who do these kinds of things, but this isn't like on the main. That's not what's driving these numbers up among these communities. At some point, these disparities cannot be attributed to Sanger's purposes from a century ago. Why not just say abortion is murder, murder is evil? We don't need to pigeonhole it into being racist or make it worse. That sets us up to adopt all kinds of issues under the anti-abortion banner. If you're looking for a comparison, compare it to Holodomor, Holocaust, terrorist attacks, or some other historical event that by definition is murder. And I would say the same thing now. I think that's what you have to do. And we've infiltrated ourselves by dumbing this down, by comparing it to these other matters. And when we do that, when we hinge our moral justification on these other matters, then I think we give people incentive to go left. It's an off-ramp, I think, or it can potentially be used as an off-ramp from the anti-abortion movement. Because once they buy into the disparities are the problem, the left has about 10 issues they want to show you are the problem. And there's other ways of reading this too, by the way. Like if a disproportionate amount of Black people or Latino people are taking advantage of abortion services, well, maybe, and if abortion's evil, I mean, the syllogism, I guess, holds, maybe there's a disproportionate amount of people in those communities who are evil. Now, no one wants to say that, right? No one in the pro-life community would ever, they would be, no, it's all Margaret Sanger from a century ago who's forcing them into this or something. Like it's a structural thing that that was created. And I'm not going to deny that urban areas with broken down families and the circumstances they live in is going to incentivize more of this kind of activity, especially with the sexually loose morals and all these things. But you have to look at this as ultimately something that people are choosing to do. Their mothers are choosing to go in there and have their babies killed. And they do know better deep down. There is a Romans 1 component to this, and they're suppressing the truth. I guess that's all I have to say about that. I'm baffled by the fact that we keep doing this. Let's just be aggressive about it. This is absolute murder. We should be against it, period. We think Donald Trump is not hard enough on it, but we will support him in order to have the latitude to keep working on this issue, because we know we won't have that latitude in a Democrat administration. All right. I was going to show you. I get these things all the time on X, but I was just going to show you. This is Aurora, Colorado. I was there not too long ago. And this is a absolutely trash Walmart parking lot. I think the guys who make this video almost get run over. And, basically what's going on is there's trafficking going on. There's this, it talks about in this post that there is a Venezuelan gang of illegal migrants who have taken control of an apartment complex. And now they're trying to, I guess the town or the city of Aurora wants to take this complex down, and they're citing code violations. But the people there, including City Councilwoman Danielle Jurinsky, are saying, wait a minute, like, come on, we know what's going on. This started with a gang takeover. And this is happening in towns where this should never have happened. Places you should never have seen this kind of thing. It's happening. And I want to, in the context of the abortion discussion, I want to also just stimulate your minds to think about other social issues that are also going on here. There's a lot of things happening at the same time. And yes, there's connections between them. But if this kind of thing can happen in Aurora, Colorado, it can happen in your community. I was in Boise earlier this year. If they can import illegal migrants deep into the heart of Idaho, they can do it where you are. If they can go into the rural areas of Wisconsin and dump illegal migrants, they can do it where you live. Don't think that that's not going to happen. Don't think that this isn't somehow by design in some way. It's a hard trip to go from Asia, to go from South America, all the way up to Idaho, to places like New York, to places like Illinois. It's a it's a long trip. There's a lot of dangers along the way, and you need resources to do it. And to happen, and to overnight have thousands of people dumped in these areas, some of whom are very bad people. And for there to be a way for them to get there, whether they get there on their own or they're transported through some kind of a government transportation service, they are funded to do this. They are funded to live here. You can't just live. It's expensive. I don't know if you felt that in your own homes. It's kind of expensive. I've heard the same thing all over the country. They're being paid, $2,000 a month. They're being paid $2,800 a month. They're being paid whatever. They're being given driver's license. They're being given special exceptions. They're being set up with jobs. People ready to set them up with jobs and being Ubers or Lyft drivers. All these resources, this network of resources is waiting for them when they come into this country. That is not a country that serves its people. That is not a country that protects its people. That is a country that undermines its people. That is a country that will die and is dying. That's an empire, really, that is dying. And that's also something to consider in this election. If your pagan neighbors have an abortion, let's say you live in the Bible Belt, it's not even your pagan neighbors. It's people that you don't share much in common with, let's say, from the big city. Where you live, it doesn't happen much. But boy, the next town over was swamped by illegal migrants. What are you going to do in this election for the sake of your children? You got to think through those things as well. Okay, let's talk about just a few minor things. We got to land the plane because we're almost an hour and a half in. But this is I just wanted to point this out. David French said, hey, it's fascinating about the angry reaction to a tweet that he had. And the tweet basically said that good people will vote for Harris, good people will vote for Trump, that kind of thing. And he says, it's fascinating, all the anger over that tweet. I think voting for Trump is a serious mistake, but that doesn't make you a bad person or mean you're going to hell. Okay. Now, besides the fact that David French wrote an article by saying you can't make a Christian case for Trump anymore, I decided to pull some of these things. David French, 2021. The evidence that January 6th was a Christian insurrection just grows and grows and grows. Combating this perversion of the gospel has to be a top priority. It's not just a heresy. It's an active threat to the peace and security of the nation. Yeah. January 6th, because there was a guy trying to dedicate the country to Jesus in the Senate chamber, it's a perversion of the gospel. Here's David French, 2023. One of the worst aspects of the new right is its no apologies ethos. That's not just unchristian, it's anti-Christian, fundamentally. I don't think he may understand it and be a bad actor, or he just may not understand what he's I know what he's talking about. It's basically like we're not going to set the left up or the institutions on the left as legitimate authorities to assess, to make moral determinations. So we don't owe them an apology. That's really what that is. David French says, Tucker's daily example have demonstrated that honesty and grace, indispensable qualities in every sphere of life, have no place in the politics of the new religious right, a right full of religious zeal, but lacking in fundamental Christian virtues. Okay. So Tucker's a pretty mainstream guy in the conservative right. So yeah, I mean, I guess the right lacks Christian, it's not Christian. I mean, that's another way or they lack Christian virtues. Christians believe in God's judgment, and while we are grateful that God's merciful, we should tremble with knowledge that he's also just, and his justice can be terrible indeed. My thoughts on the evil revealed in the SBC and beyond. And he's talking about the executive committee of the SBC not taking Me Too seriously enough. It's the same David French, like David French, come on. You really mean for us to believe now that voting for Trump it's a mistake, but it doesn't make you a bad person to vote for Trump. The people surrounding Trump, the movement surrounding Trump, you have signaled that they are bad people. and I could have pulled more examples. Here's the Dispatch. There is no remaining Christian case for Trump. That was what I was referencing earlier. Okay. Okay, one more thing before the Crusades. Are we doing the Crusades? I guess I don't have that up. We'll talk about it though. Your Abeka homeschool history book. What do you notice? Okay, I posted this earlier today. Got a lot of traction. History of the United States, and I don't know what 5th edition. I don't know what grade this is. I did Abeka. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But it has the Pilgrims. It has Abraham Lincoln. It has an immigrant at Ellis Island. It has Martin Luther King Jr., and then it has a guy in space. And that's all. It's got We the People, and then that's it. That's the, there's your cartoon, your quick image of the history of the United States. So what's the problem with this? Some people were very confused. Other people got it right away. And I think what's going on here is this is something that I've talked about on the podcast before, but there really are 2 basic frameworks for retelling the history of the country. One is the sacrificial narrative, that we got to the point we are with the blessings we have because people sacrificed, suffered deprivations, overcame obstacles. There was hardship, there was war, there was famine, there was all kinds of things, but here we are. And we can take courage and we can take inspiration from those people. And then there were heroes among them, by the way. There were heroes. We can erect statues to them. There's another narrative that says, actually, it's kind of a crummy place. And if there's anything positive to be said, it's the people who have stood against the majority, stood against the status quo, made it more equal, made it a more equal place, and diversified us, and given the government more authority to go into local and state areas to make them more equal. And I think that if you're going to look at this image, ask the question, which one does this seem to be more like, if you're going to pick a narrative, what narrative do you think is being communicated here? And it's obvious it's the more emancipation narrative. It's the emancipation narrative more than it is the sacrificial narrative. So and I can just tell from the snippets, and these aren't all, like, this is part of our history, but they're choosing which parts are significant, which parts are important, which parts even inspire a patriotism. So you have, I guess, Pilgrims, but, again, the starting point is not 1607, it's 1620. And eventually what gets absorbed into the Puritan society, the city on a hill. This is the beginning of that whole narrative of America is going to be this shining example, and eventually that turning into equality being the motivation and the reason for that. Then you have Abraham Lincoln, so expanding the government, expanding the national or the general government to be able to accomplish this kind of equality. You have the immigrants who diversify the country and come in and at Ellis Island, and these are all these positive American stories, right? Then you have MLK giving his "I Have a Dream" speech, and with the March on Washington. So the civil rights movement, and then space and our technology, I guess. So some people noticed this and caught on right away to what I was noticing. And there was a lot of discussion in this thread because there were certain people saying, like, yeah, you should read the book. Like, yeah, it's totally what you're saying, John. And other people saying there's no problem with the book. Well, I haven't read this one, but when I was a young lad, we did use Abeka history. We did use Bob Jones history. I remember Abeka history being worse. And this was going back 25 years ago. It was very Proposition Nation driven. I just remember that. I remember that from when I was young. Bob Jones was a bit better, as I recall, than Abeka. I'm not trashing Abeka. I'm not saying you can't use Abeka. I'm just saying be aware of that. That's what you get with a lot of homeschool textbooks. And I think a lot of people need to be aware because they think when they leave public school, because the public schools are absolutely insane, that this is a much more sane place. And it probably is, but it doesn't mean that you're always totally out of the woods. You got to be vigilant. It might mean you have to educate yourself and read some yourself. Some people were recommending the Tuttle twins. I don't know enough about the Tuttle twins. I don't have kids of this age, so I'm not looking into curriculums, but maybe look into the Tuttle twins. I don't know about classical conversations. I did a whole thing on that earlier this year, so I don't know if I want to recommend them, but some people were saying they're better. And we may be looking at a good, better, best kind of thing. this is one of the reasons I wanted the 1607 project to be a curriculum too. And that can still happen if we have the resources for it. We just don't. But we need resources. I would say look at Tom Wood's Liberty Classroom. Look at Brian McClanahan's McClanahan Academy. These are both resources for homeschoolers that you can use to teach history. And they're going to be a great deal better than Abeka, in my opinion. And they're going to talk about all these events, obviously, and all these people. But these aren't going to all be just the shining examples of what it means to be an American. They're going to talk about other examples from history as well. And someone did ask me, they said, John, what would you do? And I haven't really thought about it. What would you do if you only had, let's see, 5 different slots? Well, I'd probably show 1607, since that's the headwaters. And the settlers there, John Smith maybe. And then I'd probably have something from the founding era. That's just skipped over here. So I probably have George Washington, since he represents the founding era more than anyone else in my mind. And then after that, I would probably, I don't know, probably something. I mean, the Civil War is, I think, a big, big event in American history. So is the exploration out west. So I'd probably put something Civil War related, but it would be like a brother against brother type of photo, I guess. I'm spitballing. I have reserved the right to amend this. I'm making it up on the spot. And then I might put something about the exploration out west. And then finally, I'm trying to think if I would do something World War II related, or, you know, I don't, the last one I might keep, actually. I don't know. You know, Man on the Moon. I don't know. I'd have to think about that last one. You know, something from this 20th century that's very significant. It might be World War II. That might be the significant event. But that's what I would do, probably. I would see those events as the events of more importance than some of these other ones. Although the civil rights movement has affected us in many ways, mostly negative, probably. So, but if you're trying to do the whole, like, this is super patriotic America, we the people, then I'm probably not going to put that there. So that's me. That's me. Jacob says Tuttle Twins is a Tom Woods production. Oh, I didn't know that. So good. And someone says also none of those American soldiers anymore seem. Yeah, there's. I don't know. Maybe the back has an American soldier, but no. Treadle says Abeka is literally a textbook BoomerCon from what I can remember. Okay. Landon says, I was a Christian school principal for 7 years. I can't name a curriculum that doesn't laud Lincoln as the hero of the Union. And that's the problem. Not the problem, but that is a problem. Vision Forum was very pro-Puritan. Which is, you may have to pick something that you don't agree with 100% on everything. And, you know, Abeka's better than the public schools, but I think you should at least be aware you're getting a narrative. These pictures are picked in this sequence for a reason. Okay, 2 more issues to discuss. This one is, there was a big fight over this. It's kind of dumb, actually. But I'll address it because I was tweeting it. I was having some fun tweeting about it, really, is what I was doing this morning. Canon Press put out a advertisement. What's the advertisement for? Is it for New St. Andrews College? Yeah, it's for New St. Andrews College. I can't keep these things straight. Is it Canon Press? Moscow? Like, I don't know. But anyway, they put out this thing. And they're probably getting the exact reaction they wanted because everyone's talking about them. So they're really good at that at times. But this is the problem. Okay. This is what people are upset about. Some people are really defensive about it and saying that you're somehow weak and effeminate, I guess, if you think this is a problem. But young men wanted, all caps, must be willing to hoist the Jolly Roger and Johnny Cash's favorite finger whenever faced with idolatry. Now, that means they must be willing to flip the bird. And then, of course, they show Johnny Cash flipping the bird in this particular advertisement. And I'm just going to be honest with you. My first reaction when I saw that, it reminded me of homeschool kids that thought it was really edgy to say a curse word. And when they would say it, it just seemed really lame. You know what I mean? Like they thought they were doing something super edgy, but it's something that's common. It's something that's around you. It's not, The only standard you're trying to break is the standard within the bubble. Within it shows that you're in a bubble by framing it that way from the beginning. Where do I want to go with this? I don't know if I have a dog in the fight, so to speak. Like the reactions to it seem like overkill. Like it's like some of it seems like it's the same. Like think back to two innocent kids who are like, you said a bad word. And then the other kid, like, you shouldn't say that. That's what you can summarize a lot of what's going on this particular question with that parallel. So Owen Strand is like the kid, I guess, who's like, you know, because he says that it is deeply problematic. It is deeply problematic. I don't know if I would go that far to say it's deeply problematic, but it is immature. It is, it's odd. I remember that the Johnny Cash giving the finger pose was at, I think, San Quentin prison. The photographer who took it basically said, hey, you want to say something to the warden? And Johnny Cash basically just did that. And I'm sure everyone started cheering because, you know, they're prisoners and that's who he's playing to. There was an album I had when I was a kid, a Johnny Cash album that had on the back cover him doing this. I remember my dad had come. I didn't even know. See, I was that homeschool kid, I guess. I just didn't see. I didn't recognize what Johnny Cash was doing. And my dad came in and put like a black tape over it. So I wouldn't, which of course pointed it out even more to me. And then I was like, wait a minute. I didn't know what was going on. That's what it is. And then I had to be, well, I think I knew what it was. I don't think they had to explain it to me, but you know, think about what that means. Think about, I know some people are trying to say, oh, that's it goes back to England and archers. And okay, I don't know, maybe, but just think about what that means in our context. Like if you were to verbalize that, what that means, I don't need to verbalize it. And just think of how silly that is. It's just silly. You can promote masculinity and being tough without that. And I'm not like, what I'm saying, I guess, is that I think it needs to be more based, and more based would be less cringe, which that to me, that's cringe. Okay. Just making that, you know, kind of like a big deal, making like, hey, we're okay with people flipping the finger if they're flipping it at degeneracy and idolatry. I think it was idolatry. Like, I don't know, give me a break. Like it's just crass. You know, let's get some real like prophetic, thus saith the Lord type. You know, we need to bring that back somehow. Some really strong judgmental language that really, you know, I think telling someone that they're going to hell or saying that, you know, God's going to send you to hell, you're in danger of hellfire. I think that actually is so much more shocking and powerful if you say it in the right way than flipping the finger off. Because I live in New York. I see this all the time, guys. Like this is the way people interact. And that's why it's like, I'm not like it doesn't offend me super much because I'm so desensitized to it. You know what I mean? So I don't want to build a church off of any of this. I don't want to like wax long and eloquent because it's just kind of dumb in my opinion. But I think they're probably getting they had to know this was going to be intentionally somewhat provocative. And some young men would be like, yeah, you know, we can break the rules, but like you're breaking rules inside a very narrow segment of Christianity. It's a little Christian bubble where you're breaking the rules. It's breaking rules. Honestly, this undermines traditional Bible Belt towns that are still out there where that is breaking the rules. That's what it is. Like it's where those are still rules, where that still exists in society. That's the only place that's going to find it edgy. And that's the place that we really would like to conserve. Please. We don't want them doing that. You know, I remember when I was living in Lynchburg, which is Bible Belt. I remember there, I heard this kid say the F word. And you hardly ever hear the F word out in public in Lynchburg. And because it's Bible Belt, Liberty University's there. You don't hear it on campus. I mean, and it's wonderful. I'm going to be honest. It's wonderful walking into coffee shops, hearing Christian music, not having to hear the F word, not having to see people flip other people off and lose their minds, not seeing magazine racks filled with semi-pornographic material. I miss it in some ways, even though I struggled sometimes with some of the aspects of living in a bit of a bubble. But there were some great things about it. And I remember I heard a kid say that, and I was like, man, it's coming here too. And I'm sure even now it's because of television and all these other things, it's more normalized. Where I live right now, you hear that all the time. Kids say that stuff all the time. So someone says it's worth noting that San Quentin show was before Johnny Cash's own apparent Christian conversion. 100%. 100%. I meant to make this point, and I'm glad you said something, Andrew. That show was when Johnny Cash was strung out on drugs and he was in the world. He was not a believer yet. When Johnny Cash became a believer, I don't know of any pictures of him doing that. So there you go. There you go. That makes my point perfectly. The "you shouldn't say that" kid is a great illustration for many evangelical influencers. Yeah, probably. And I'm not saying they shouldn't, like, not whatever. They could do whatever they want. Like, I'm not coming down with, I'm not pearl clutching. Yeah, I was accused of that. I'm not like, oh my goodness, they said. I'm more like, okay, big deal, guys. Like, you're not, that doesn't make you tough. That doesn't shock, or like, it shouldn't be. It should just, it makes you look kind of silly. That's all. Don't be silly. That's what I say. Don't be silly. I'm offending everyone today, aren't I? I said stuff about Liberty University. Said stuff about Canon Press. I said, who can we? Instead of the abolitionists, who can I still offend today? Let's just see. Someone, TH says, 98 grad here. I remember the days in Lynchburg. The biggest attraction was the 24-hour Walmart. The kids would break curfew to walk to. Yeah, I remember that myself. I visited friends who were at Liberty University when I was a lot younger, and it was a different place, by the way. It was more Southern. Lynchburg was more Southern back in the day. Like, you'd walk into Walmart and there'd still be people there with like camo hats and like tattoos and Confederate flags and stuff. Like, it was, it's changed. I'd say as Liberty University's grown, the area's grown and become more suburban mom. But I don't know why I said that. I'm just throwing it out there. Fun fact about Lynchburg, if you didn't know. Okay, let's switch gears. Do I have any gears to switch? Don't we have something else? Oh, yeah, I got to find it now. James White and the Crusades thing. I don't want to say much about this, but I'll say a little bit. Okay, this is the only thing I wanted to highlight. James White. I'll show you. And I've listened to, for probably about 15 years I don't want to say when. For about 15 years, I did not miss a Dividing Line episode. And I have the utmost respect for James White. I don't have the time to listen to podcasts like I used to. If I had unlimited time, I would still listen to James White's podcast. So I don't really listen to many podcasts as it is. I'm a podcaster. I know that's weird. I read more. But anyway, James White he's meant a lot to me. Because he has got some great resources on Islam, on Roman Catholicism, and all kinds of things. And I've just been helped, I think, by some of those resources. And so I want to give the man respect. And he is older than me. He's got more experience and that kind of thing. This concerns me, though, and it's a theological concern. And I'm not going to, I guess, let no one look down on your youth. I'm just going to say it. Smash Bales, the account Smash Bales on Twitter, said, if you think the Crusades were bad, you don't understand the horrors of Islam. And James White responded by saying, if you think the Crusades were good, you don't understand the very essence of the gospel. The horror of the false gospel, and have probably never seriously prayed to be used of God, to bring Muslims to saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. I'm still scratching my head. And of course, it's gotten a lot of love, that tweet. I'm just really scratching my head about this. And of course, you can see I liked the response. I don't even know if I read the whole response. Oh, I think it's just Smash Bales basically saying, look, the Muslims were they were going into Christian lands. They were taking slaves of Christian peoples, making them janissaries, making them sex slaves to fight against Christian peoples, lands in Christendom. All this kind of thing. So I like that because I was like, that's the reason that anyone would say the Crusades were good. That's the reason anyone would defend the Crusades, right? So yes, we all understand. I've known forever that Pope Urban, when he issued the call for the First Crusade, offered an indulgence, guaranteed eternal life if you served in the Crusades. I know that is wrong theology, and every Protestant knows that. I would think I don't know where Catholics lined up on that, to be honest with you today, but I'm assuming they'd have to try to defend it. But yeah, like that's obviously very wrong. It doesn't mean that was the motivation of everyone who signed up to go to the crusade. It doesn't mean that's what the crusade was all about. The fundamental reason for the crusades, and there were, I think, 5 of them over about a 200-year period, the fundamental reason for them was because Islam had aggressively made its way into Christian lands, taken Christian lands, even taken Constantinople, and was wreaking havoc, was like I said, making slaves of Christian peoples, was using young Christian boys as sex slaves and then making them janissaries in their army. It was after hundreds of years, centuries of aggression, that you have this response. And I would like to say that the reason now you have some people wearing Knights Templar or putting Knights Templar stuff on their profile is because it really does seem like we're in a similar situation in some ways. Only it's not military conquest. It's through immigration. And the Pope just the other day insinuated that to be against mass migration, something like that, is to not be fully Christian. It was something along those lines. Like Christians should be in support of immigration and so forth. It's like, not the time to say this, Pope. We are losing our character in the West in many places. In the Anglo world, in England, it's the saddest thing. Like, I can't even believe some areas are they have a 2-tiered police system now there. These Muslim areas are treated differently than Christian areas and so forth. And the violence against that some of these migrants are committing against other people, it's horrific. It's horrific. And for people to say, we really needed something like the Crusade, or to draw inspiration from the Crusades that said we're going to fight back against Islam, it makes perfect sense. I think I'm interpreting this accurately. And if Dr. White ever watches it, I think he has to know this. But hopefully I'm the everyman here that's trying to say, look, no one's saying anything about the gospel. No one's saying that no one's saying that the Crusades were about using a false gospel or penetrating Muslims' lands with a false gospel, and that was their purpose. The purpose was primarily, it was a defensive action to go and to take back some of these lands that the Muslims had took from Christians, and to defend against greater incursions. That's what the Crusades were about. And so anyway, what did I say? This is the concern I have. I'll show you on screen here. So I just said very essence of the gospel ? Just to maybe see if he would clarify and say, oh no, I didn't mean I didn't mean that someone who believes in what I just said is denying the gospel. But he seemed to kind of, I don't know. Is it a double down? Are we misunderstanding each other? He said, yes, John, Rome's gospel does not give peace. Okay, I know this. Its sacramental system is opposed to the gospel taught by Paul, as we see in Galatians. I thought you were reformed. It's like, okay. I said, the confusion seems to be over whether one can believe this about Rome and also think the Crusades were overall good for pushing back on Muslim aggression in Christian lands. We're very used to woke Christians telling us we do not have the gospel because of some social view. And then Connell said, watching himself destruct in real time is something. And I actually liked it because I know that may sound harsh to some of you, but guys, this is, I meant what I said. Like, this is the kind of language I am used to hearing from the social justice guys. That's why I was like, you really want to, the very essence of the gospel, you really want to bring that into this? Like, someone who thinks the Crusades were good is just, somehow they don't care about Muslims. They've never prayed to be used of God to bring one to the faith. I mean, these are accusations that just, I think, are unfair. And Dr. White has done much good. I think he's done much good debating Muslims. I think he's done much good with other cults, and I can't go with him on this one. And I do think this betrays some of the things that he's said before. So I know I'm going out on a limb, and I know there's a lot of James White fans, probably even in this audience. I'm going out on a limb with this one, And I'm only going off his tweet, by the way, really. But this is, if he means what I think he means here, this is a self-destruction. Like this goes against, I think, the very principles that he's advocated for years. I would say to him, yes, the gospel is what Paul said in Galatians. That's kind of the point I was trying to make. Like, it doesn't require you to be for or against some social cause. It doesn't require you to be for or against the Crusades or think they're good or bad to have the gospel. You can have the gospel and think the Crusades were good. You can have the gospel and think the Crusades were bad, because the gospel is the work of Christ. It's not our belief about social matters. It's not what we do in wanting to bring Muslims to Christ either. That's not the gospel. So I see a tension. And it's, to what extent this is a meltdown. Yeah, it would be a self-destruction, because it would be betraying, I think, the very things that I've learned from James White. So I say this, hopefully I say this and people can catch that I have a lot of respect for him, and hopefully they can sense their, if I'm way off, I'm willing to be corrected. Hopefully there's a humility there. But this concerns me. This is what I've written about in my books. I've spent, I don't know how many hundreds of hours talking about woke guys who commit the Galatian heresy because they attach the gospel to some social view and say, you have to have this social view or you don't have the gospel. And to see that kind of language creeping up in other places, not on the left, is concerning to me. So I just want to say that. I want to point that out, and hopefully that comes through. Wonder if Mr. White is against the Spanish Reconquista as a whole. I don't know. Dr. White seems to be getting frustrated with what he sees as theological disputes from a crowd mostly concerned about political disputes. The latter is not making the theological claim. That's an astute observation. I think you're right about that. Yeah, the people that are the Christians who are very gung-ho about the Crusades, I think it's primarily a political motivation. Political dynamics are driving this. But I think they do see a cultural Christian society, socially Christian. It doesn't mean every single person's a Christian, but they operate off of like Christian mores and laws and that kind of thing. I think that people who want to see that defended as a Christian society, I think that's where a lot of the hang-up is, because then he might call it sacralism. I don't know. That's a term I think that's pretty unique to him. I was looking that up. I found one other person in the 80s, I think, who used that term. But I think the broader concept is that there's like a Constantinianism of some kind, like a merger, they think, the critics of this, of church and state that shouldn't be there, and that causes corruption and these kinds of things. And maybe that is what's behind this and what's driving this more than anything else. But I think it could be someone who thinks the Crusades were good, and you're not that. You're not trying to say, let's merge ecclesiastical and magisterial power. Paul Kern says, read some of his stuff, listened to some of his podcasts, don't agree with all of his stuff, appears to have become woke. James White, I don't think I would call him woke. I don't listen to his stuff as much, like I said, anymore. But he was helpful when I first was undergoing some of this stuff, just as a voice of encouragement, that I knew there was someone else who saw some of the things that I saw at Southeastern. All right. Well, I guess that's it. I guess that's the podcast today. We've been going almost 2 hours. You got a mega edition today. I covered a lot of stuff. So I hope that was helpful for some of you, just going through the news stuff. I am going to be preaching again in like 2 weeks, I guess. So you can be praying for me as I navigate that. And there's a number of speaking engagements I have coming up, starting with the Fundamentals Conference. So I'm looking forward to doing some more like biblical exegesis stuff. And I just want to let everyone know, especially patrons, those who support my work, I'm really appreciative. Patreon.com/worldview conversation. And I haven't given an update there in a while, but there is some exclusive content I'm working on for patrons. I think we're going to be talking about Van Til a little bit and what he thought about natural law. It's going to be interesting. But I just wanted to say that I've been writing as well and trying to really, I wanted to get my book done in June. And because of a number of circumstances in my own life, I wasn't. So I'm I'm very close. And so I'm furiously trying to finish writing the book. And this whole last week I spent on understanding the Declaration of Independence's phrase, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, and how that's been used, misused, misinterpreted. I think you're going to like this book. I'm not going to give it away. I mean, you got to get the book to get what I found on that topic. So I've been pretty busy. But anyway, God bless. More coming. Bye now.